right, now we're back. So most of these items are updates. The drive-through regs. I added a few things based on our conversation. I will send these to you guys as well. The audience can see when this gets posted. But so for the drive-through regulations, everything on the first page stayed the same. But I did revise, we had minimum stacking language, minimum queuing in there for our discussion. But it added some other versions, it's 4 other requirements, which is about the dumpster enclosure, the message boards or other noise generating structures, lighting, and then also stating with the drive-through facilities if they're within 100 feet. I should say 100 feet of a residential use shall not operate on a 24-hour basis, which are just kind of placeholders. We can maybe discuss more as time goes on, and I will provide these to everybody. That was just the first thing.
Your D,
Yeah,
any drive-through facility located within 100 feet.
it should say of residential use
Yep, that's
property. So there you go. But that's
Do we say dumpster enclosures and access? So that the emptying of the dumpster does not cause?
yes.
Yep.
We need to define detriment. I mean,
It's not really.
is interruption a detriment? Is someone gonna argue detriment is damage?
I would hope not. Detriment would, in this case, be just to the
It
access.
says to drive-through operations.
Okay. Yeah, detriment to
There's
drive.
the file, it's not really file.
Yeah. So people may argue. See, Liz just pulled them too.
It is.
Liz. But those are just some of the updates, and we've got plenty of time until fall town meeting, so we can kind of settle on this for a little bit, maybe come back to it if there's any other things that people think would be good to add to this. But I wanted to just give that update, so I'm just going to make those couple of corrections. That works. The other things on here too, they just put a couple items for the continued bylaw discussion items. One of them, I know Don Martinez mentioned the scenic road bylaw, which I included to everybody in that email. I didn't really want to go over it in great length because I think the biggest issue with the scenic roads, it's not even really the regulations with the scenic road, it's more of the uses on the scenic road because there's industrial uses on scenic roads, which that's the issue.
Yeah.
You know, it's not really the bylaw itself, I don't think. And that's why, Liz, or you,
I took the time to read it, so I had a question.
yeah,
Let me, I can pull it up to you. And that would be the answer. A lot of the definitions, it talks about 4 or 6 inch diameter trees.
yes.
And I read it like 3 times and wasn't sure what was the difference between the first 2 sentences in that. So I didn't know if it's just me.
You know which section that is?
It was right in the front under definitions. So cutting or tree removal, the destruction of one or more, is that
Yeah.
tree trunks of a diameter 6 inches or more. I'm sorry, I didn't bring my glasses, so I can't read it all that well. It's the first two elements, the or.
Can you make that bigger?
Right, yeah. I think.
I know you have to catch
I
on.
I can run out the rabbit key, my, glasses. Yeah, so the construction of one or more tree trunks of diameter 6 inches or more measured 4 feet from the ground. Or of more than one tree trunk diameter 4 inches or more measured. So
I should just say if it's for a tree trunk
right,
diameter 4 inches, or it may have been a typo where they were saying it was.
so it just seemed like if there's an opportunity to clean it up, I mean, you're not gonna do it just for that, but I really can't, several times, I said, what am I missing?
No, that's definitely, I think, a screw up.
Yeah, I think so. Doesn't make sense. Under news was another, I just thought, there's been a lot of talk in the news locally about bike lanes and whatnot. And I see a lot of other things included, so if we're gonna make a change, I was gonna propose that we at least consider adding something like, as more and more bike lanes are being added to the intersections.
So include something in the definition.
Yeah, because we have sidewalks and structures, drainage systems, etc. I don't know if it has any type of meaningful impact on it, but just noticed it.
Well, I know the big thing too right now is DOT jurisdictional projects, they use the term shared use tab.
Right, like shared use path,
And it's a wider sidewalk, so you can get like people
Mhm.
off the road and into the headlights of a unsuspecting pedestrian.
Well, now that, the nicer weather's here on my street, it's like I feel so bad for these bikers. Some of the killed.
Yeah, you're taking the danger of the bikers, and now it's the danger of the pedestrians. But
Yeah.
anyway, something we can look at.
Yeah.
But with that, those are the two things. Was there anything else on that?
Just one, later on in definition under consideration. I think it's a section, yeah, considerations. Um, we do have some beautiful roads that are adjacent to bodies of water.
Mhm.
And I know in other towns, they've used language that included that as something that you should consider.
Okay.
When defining something, and I didn't see anything in here that directly referenced, whether it's a river, stream, lake, but adjacent. That helps make it scenic, in addition to things like stone walls.
Gotcha.
I wonder if that would be something akin to like conservation land rather than just body of water.
Or, yeah,
Just a-
yeah, something with this. And then I was surprised to see there wasn't any type of enforcement related language in this. I don't know, as I read it, I said, so if I'm the person who's going to do some work on one of these scenic roads, so what? If I'm violating this, I mean, maybe there's something there, language in it that I missed. But I thought, shouldn't there be something that gives it, I don't know, something that references some enforcement element of some nature?
Well, we usually put enforcement language in the bylaw, just stating that, like with the filing, basically stating that if you do want consent of the planning board, you have to find this. Number two, destroying trees.
But if they just go and let's say they cut down a, 300-year-old machine.
All the stuff wrong on that property.
Yeah, and they go like, so what? All right, so say you didn't like it, I don't care, I'm gonna do it anyway. I mean, I don't know, I'm trying to make,
They're in violation of it, of the scenic road bylaw.
well, so what?
And then so what you have to do is you have to start with a letter, inform them there, and, give them the right to appeal. If they say, this, then you gotta take them to court.
Do we have like a fine schedule for anything? Like-
Or a cease and desist of your operation.
You can have fine schedules.
Yes, the change, build it on the budget.
A person would say, oh, geez, you live from dollars a month, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I get that.
But if they're violating a zoning regulation, normally, get them into court, and then they have to, the fines, we never get the fine.
Yeah.
But at least we get them to correct, what they're doing,
Yeah,
because they have to at that point, because we don't,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, I think in this case though, Don, like there's the compensatory plantings.
So that element was nice, there's also with the, with the stone wall, if they, was it more than 10 feet, or so many cubic.
Yeah,
But, yeah, but I was just asking myself, so if I'm reading this, what's the consequence? Is it a stop work order? You bring.
Oh, yeah.
It's a cease and desist.
Yeah, okay, so that's the, all right.
Yeah, and then depending on what they did. When the whole scheme or something, it has to go back.
yeah,
And if they say no, that's when you have to just keep it going.
and this, there's your replacement
Yeah,
trees, so if they cut down something. But,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, but there are some ways too that, you can kind of,
I know Blackstone is like that historical shade tree. That,
That sycamore.
yeah, the sycamore, it's a beautiful tree, and I know that created a bunch of controversy. Yeah, it's
You know
protected.
what that is, don't you?
no,
See Elm Street, right on near just past the Bellingham line. You go down, Elm Street winds
Yeah.
down, and there's like this all granite house.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's
Yeah.
Just before that, it's a huge sycamore tree.
And there's some historical significance associated
So,
with it. Yeah.
yeah,
But they were able to protect it using some sort of town bylaw.
Gotcha.
I don't know if there's a scene.
No, what they did is they put a subdivision in. You know that road that they put in just
Yeah.
before that?
Up the hill.
That tree was on that subdivision land, so in their approval, they. put
Oh,
language
yeah,
in there that,
yeah.
you're gonna protect this tree.
Yeah,
Well, that was part of the approval.
so maybe planning board.
Yeah, definitely.
so that was, that's scenic road, so.
Yeah.
We can discuss it maybe a little bit more in detail. I think to get the most bang for our buck, it's probably gonna go down to let's looking at the uses and zones. So, which segues into my next topic.
Perfect segue.
Yeah, you got anything?
No, I was just gonna say, I think the big thing with scenic roads is what's been put on that takes away from the scenic
Right.
road. So,
Well, that's like the whole the philosophy of it. It's like, is there any bite here? And it's like, what are we trying to achieve here? And this bylaw doesn't seem to be achieving what it was intended to do. Because the problem is what's going on now. It's like,
Yeah. It's just like you have scenic road and then you have industrial limit. All around,
Yeah, so that's why these should be modified, because a scenic road and what is oxymoron. This should have been done long ago.
Commercial district.
Yeah, Maple Street, I know.
You have to put Maple Street in the scenic road.
Yeah, we got obliterated a few times on the plan.
That's the town meeting too. I mean, that went to town, Maple Street went to town meeting and
Twice.
it was a no.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I think that was to change from, industrial to suburban, which if you look here, industrial, pretty much all of the commercial uses are allowed through either by right or special permit. Industrial uses, obviously in the industrial zone, all allowed pretty much through the special permit or by right process. Suburban, completely opposite. So, if those existing businesses that are there were changed to suburban, they would be existing non-conforming uses, which is why they were so gung ho about, no, we don't want it changed to suburban.
Suburban should just be converted right away, residential.
Yeah, I mean, it's suburban and residential have the same uses and they have almost the exact same,
I couldn't figure out the difference.
Suburban has setbacks are a little stronger, like sides of 15 versus 10.
yeah,
You
which in the grand scheme of things.
It should be 15 anyway.
Yeah,
Well, even like the agricultural versus, the residential, if you look at livestock.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, just on that page, there's livestock and it's the other one that's different. I see OES, but they're all the same all the way down, so. Yeah, in this page, there might be other, what's the other page look like?
I think if you start getting down to
Uses?
these ones, the recreational uses, they change a bit.
Okay, so camping, you can do it in agriculture, but not in the rest.
You can do a nice bathhouse in the agricultural zone.
That's our street.
In terms of the residential uses are pretty much the same.
Yeah,
We see the accessory uses. They're all pretty much the same. But the big thing is like that zone change, for example, between suburban and industrial is obviously a huge shift. I think from what I was mentioning previously, I think if we look at the industrial uses, what's allowed and what's allowed in the B1, B2 zone, which the B1, B2 zone is also pretty wide array of uses. Like, in my opinion, a lot more than most towns would want in like a business zone. Like usually, for example, like in the business zone, the B1 zone, I was looking at this really good today. See. The auto, boat, and farm equipment sales in that zone. I don't know if you necessarily want the dealership in the Sierra Town or on Hume Street. There's also retail sales of gas, so a gas station. That would be a little bit difficult right next to residential houses, which all border the B1 and B2 districts.
Right.
You have the major business complex. Major business complex is a huge, huge project. Like that's industrial uses that are over 250,000 square feet and business or commercial uses that are over 50,000 square feet. It's a big
Yeah.
development,
Sure.
and that could be right next to residential.
10 feet from a residential property.
Yeah. If you look at our zoning table, there are areas where I think the B1, B2 currently exists. It makes sense. Like the prime example is like Mendon Street, for example. It's the road less traveled. Everything all along Mendon Street is some type of business commercial use. And if there are residential houses off of Mendon Street, it's usually on subdivisions that are set further off. So like that is okay. However, if you look at like Mechanic Street, the center of town, you don't want a lot of these uses there. And then you also look at industrial uses that are on, Maple Street, there's some on Farm Street now, Depot Street. That's a little bit different than what you see on Williams Way, which like Williams Way in Bellingham is a prime industrial park. Anything you really want can go there because it doesn't design. It doesn't.
Yes.
Border.
Including adult use zone.
Well, yeah, that's in there.
That's up there.
'Cause that's a prime.
Yeah, that's it right there.
That's something that is kind of free reign. Whatever you want to do, go there. But it's industrial park.
On the outskirts of the town.
Honestly, but these other situations, like the major business complex, industrial uses, contractor yards is a huge one that I think needs to be honed in on because if you have industrial zones that are near residential uses, the contractor yards, which are allowed by right, you can have all kinds of outdoor storage and like we have no screening requirements. The
Yeah, look at
planning
these,
board-
for example.
Yeah, the planning board has tried to implement as much screening as possible, and obviously, as the developers willing to work, that's great. Some of them, as we all know, are not exactly willing to work. But these are the things that I think we should look at for, scenic roads, but not even just scenic roads, just everywhere in town.
It'd be applicable to both though. Right?
Exactly.
Including scenic roads.
Yeah, so that
So-
was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's all right, so. Scenic roads, to me, didn't have anything industrial on them. So is this something, I mean, if you got a scenic road with industrial zoning on it, is that off the table or can that be modified? Because, you know, to me, there shouldn't be any industrial on a scenic road.
Or like big setbacks.
No, I agree.
I don't even, just.
No, I agree. I agree. Actually, you know, if you see it setback, then you're not gonna see enough traffic.
What?
Right, yeah, traffic. Yeah.
I don't think it should be, I mean, you know, that's just one person's opinion,
I don't disagree with you, and I think in order to get it to work, I think especially for Maple Street in particular, I would recommend looking at, first of all, the businesses that are within the industrial zone. Obviously, there are some warehouses, they're already existing, so it doesn't really matter. But for the other, like Camp Bow Wow, I think it's J. Brian Day, and D&D, which is Tommy, that's from, that's from.
Yeah, but let's wait. Let's not. Franklin, yeah, well, I don't know.
Sure, you said Frank.
Is it? Okay.
Their business is partly Bellingham, but those are uses, J. Brian Day is a professional office. And Bow Wow is an animal kennel, which is all allowed
Yeah.
in the B1 zone. But theirs is through Board of Appeals, which they have approval through. And then the D&D mulch is, I would say, the back portion, which is in Franklin, would definitely be considered a contractor yard.
You can have a whole storage permit too.
But I don't think it's through Bellingham. I think
It should be, it's still fits in Bellingham.
either way, like D&D mulch is probably the one existing business there that you don't really want to copy closer to Maple Street and then set back.
It's operation. There's no more bulk storage permits available. That's it. Only where they are now.
Yeah, so well, that's
So
good.
that's good.
That is good. But I think what I am just concerned with industrial uses is that contract not, it's just such a catch-all.
It's such a boring. So basically, you want to set them up everywhere. And it's a constant battle. Even not by right, that they do it.
Yeah, so what I would recommend is try to strike a balance, get like a light commercial district that we can agree upon that takes some of the commercial uses. I don't even think that you need to broach the subject on these industrial uses. I mean, if you wanted to do like small scale manufacturing and do like, maximum, you know, 10,000 square feet for a building, I don't even know, but these are some of the things that you can do for like a light commercial district and utilize that for areas like Maple Street, on Farm Street, those sorts of things. And then as we dig deeper into some of the more public facing pedestrian areas, which is why I think the Shrewsbury thing next. So I don't want to go to that quite yet until there's any questions about the use table, but there's more plans for that, which is going to be a bigger lift. That's how I would recommend trying to figure out how to get this intermediate zone in place. And it might make sense to even just look at the B1, B2 zone and start cleaving off uses on there, further defining uses on there and start putting that somewhere, but there's so many ways that we can do this.
In other towns where you've seen that sort of buffered zoning, what are they called?
Usually you got residential, commercial, industrial, and residential usually has multiple subsets because it's, bigger lots and smaller. I've seen
Mixed use.
and mixed use, but so usually, like you'll see for the commercial uses, or I'll call it non-residential uses, you have an industrial zone and a commercial zone. A commercial zone would be more in line with Hartford Ave, industrial zone more in line with Williams Way. But like town centers and areas that have large commercial centers but have something more specific, those are usually business zones or some overlay.
Right.
We pretty much have everything lumped into that industrial and business and not kind of defining where in town these things should be. So like, for example, business two, which goes from Mendon Street all the way through the center of town to all the way down to Cannock Street. That's a huge array of properties. You want your town center to be pedestrian friendly, more aesthetically pleasing. Mendon Street is never going to be a major pedestrian thoroughfare. You know, that's just not what's going to happen.
It's going out of town.
You know, so that's why, you know, you want in the town center, buildings closer to the street, parking in the back. You probably don't need to do that on Linden Street, and it can be different uses that are, you want to call them destination. It can be anything,
Right.
you know? So,
Mitigate or minimize, some of the existing situations where we have, you know, nice residential properties directly adjacent to, you know, big box buildings. You know, without having to go through complete rezoning, you know, are there ways that, you know, we can think about future, obviously.
So as long as there's a change in today, this is a change in use, you know, if we get from the district then, or an overlay.
Yeah.
As soon as there's a change of use, there's a permit.
Okay.
that's exactly it, and that's how you correct it, obviously.
Takes a while.
Oh, yeah.
I hate to say it, if it's in place, the damage is done.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's try to correct it in
It's public
the future,
future.
when they more relief, expand the business, or
Yeah.
even if they're doing a change in operations, you know, come in and we'll
You get the chance to,
open to the
you get the
standards.
chance to regulate it, or bring it in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the question I think I have, is that, like, for example, Maple Street, Understone was here for this one. You know, you start driving up Maple Street, and not, you know, you get the corner, which is the warehouse there, and you go up, and that's what, an asphalt company right next to it. You
And you
keep
have
going,
residential.
you got some residential there, and then, you know, you get the businesses, the warehouses for them, well, it's like, I think we missed the boat on this one long ago, and how much of these properties are, like, what percentage of that area at this point would even be developed? And if it's, you know, and I question the teeth, the teeth that's there with what's up there now, and how, and changing the, you know, the industrial to B1 or some special district would move it forward, but you know, how, you know, we wish Tom's here for this one, but yeah, they find that when they come in, we don't have the teeth right now to do any. You know, we can worry about trees, and like LMP came in, and we lost that one. And, you know, those types of things.
Yeah, and you're right.
Is this, is Maple Street at this point?
But you also have High Street right there with that big open.
High Street, High Street, I think High Street might be a different case.
Well, the ones are all zone residential anyway.
Yeah, but
That whole
that's,
section
that's
was about.
Yeah.
Since you, my house didn't ask, I think isn't that designated one or no?
It is.
It is, it's designated.
that's,
One of our pie is Amazon.
yeah,
So that'll be. open
right,
space.
so that's not,
Yeah, that's not gonna change.
yeah, that doesn't change, but, you know,
But I-
the rest of High Street.
Yeah, to your point, Phil, though, if we're trying to mitigate specific types of developments in the future, we should probably get ahead of the lots that aren't developed yet, and then maybe come back to talking about things that already exist, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we should definitely look at it though as a whole, because
Right, I agree.
Ultimately, we don't, I agree, I think.
If we were to stop certain things from moving forward in certain neighborhoods, the fastest way to do that is to change the zoning in those neighborhoods first.
agreed. Yeah.
Not to get off this topic, but the center, you know, the center of town type of topic. You know, and extending, I mean, we've got Blackstone Street with the library, schools, fairly walkable and all that. That to me feels like a, a better opportunity to do something that would be longer lasting. That
Yeah,
I just, to extend something down and around or some sort of, I don't know how to do that.
What's left on Blackstone Street?
That's not much, but at least you wouldn't have, 20 years from now, somebody coming in. I mean, right now, you don't have businesses there, you don't have that type of thing going on.
The future is important. I mean, at some point, we may put a new high school, middle school somewhere else, and then someone will buy that tract of land, which is huge
mhm,
combined.
mhm. Yeah,
Into smaller chips on it.
yeah, well, I think too,
I mean, that area, I mean, to me, should be walkable. Like you mean, same type of thing with this in the front.
yeah,
So,
Blackstone Street's all residential too.
yeah.
I-
Residential,
On one side.
Yeah, it's all residential, it's just town, municipal on the other side, it's still residential,
yeah,
it's not business.
and something like that is,
It's exempt because it's town.
yeah,
Town sells it.
Well, it's still residential,
Okay,
you
yeah.
know,
I guess those are the things we wanna think about.
Yeah.
Make sure the Ts are crossed.
so how about this, because I know the use table, this is gonna be a big discussion moving forward for the entire existence of Bellingham until it becomes unincorporated. Zoning will be discussed.
We can, fix this and move things in another direction.
So maybe for the next meeting, what I can do is, if I've sent this to you guys, if you want to take a look at it and review detail, maybe the next step would be to pull out the zoning map. And actually, I will go through it, I will come up with areas.
a couple of areas at a time.
Yeah, and maybe we can discuss a little bit more, because I think this is a huge thing, and I think it's gonna require a bit of talking through like this to kind of come up with an idea to focus on certain areas and figure out what the best option is.
It would seem like the developed on the not yet developed land would be a good influence stuff.
And obviously, scenic roads and industrial. Clearly, we've pendulum swung too far, but as Phil said. There's maybe not much we can do to mitigate that. Uh, Whereas. If new developments start coming in and everyone's like, well, we don't want that either. If we didn't take the opportunity to kind of get in front of the developable land first.
Yeah,
I think,
A little bit of history here. I mean, I'm completely on board with where this is going, but it must be 40 years ago. I sat in the town hall before this building. Who's the gentleman on the wall with the white hair?
Arcan,
Willie, okay?
Is that his name?
Wilfred?
Okay.
Hmm?
Arcan.
When he was the head of planning board or something at one
He
point.
was a select board member and he was on DPW, he was the DPW.
And he made it clear that Maple Street was going industrial and he was gonna drive the current residential out at some point as they get sold. And that was gonna be the tax saving base. And when Leo Mayuski came in with the development that I live in, it was fireworks all the time.
mhm,
And when Leo drove to get Scenic Road pushed through, it became a running joke among his group, and he wanted that section of town because the access to the highway on both ends to be the industrial complex long before he wanted Depot Street, if I remember the conversations. This, we're talking 85, 87, maybe,
mhm.
maybe even up to 90 at some point.
If I'm not mistaken too, I think that makes sense, because I heard rumors that your development, the developer actually threatened or may have actually submitted a 40B to kind of tell the town, I can do this, or I can do this.
that was part of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, but,
And of course, he never got permitted on the Franklin side because they didn't, because of the Franklin said, oh, we're not sending a bus from
over all the way from Gorelick down around the corner down and in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the bottom line is, I mean, even if you look at the approvals back in the early 2000s, as recent as anything, you will see the approvals for all of these different developments they're pretty lax because the town was hungry for industrial development and we got it. Our taxes are very low, but it comes at a cost.
Do we think that prevailing attitude is in the town now? Because all these conversations have to go to town meeting at some point.
Meaning pro-development or pro.
It's mostly anti-development.
Yeah, I think the focus now,
Enough's enough.
I think Bellingham is hungry for development in the form of quality of life. I think that is the sentiment. Obviously, I think I'll put it this way to make things a little bit bright and cheerful. I think Bellingham is in a pretty good position right now because we have a lot of industrial development. Most of the industrial development, which is a big tax revenue for the town, is here. Most of it's built. If we capitalize on new growth in the form of redevelopment, which is what I would personally prefer in the center of town, Mechanic Street, Pulaski Boulevard, you're going to still see economic growth. You're going to see quality of life, better quality of life. And I think it would cause the pendulum to swing a bit for people to maybe have a little bit more of an appetite for progress in the form of redevelopment and
Maybe rezoning to get
exactly. And I think
because a lot of the breaks, I've been to multiple zoning, I think 2 zoning attempts
yeah,
for Maple Street,
yep,
including one of them was a sound reduction, all shot down.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the
I can remember it was the business owners themselves were the ones that were pushing that.
yeah,
It was the business side of things, losing the business rights up there that will cause the uproar up there.
they packed the house.
They packed it, cause I was in that.
Yeah.
We tried to do
They-
last heat.
Going after small businesses and allowing Amazon to come in. So that kind of rhetoric got a lot of people fired up. They tried to do an amendment on the floor. And I think town council was just like,
Yeah.
whatever, like, what,
Change you mean?
yeah, and
From mechanic to, 495?
yeah, so I think what we ended up doing was just passing it over and it died.
Yeah,
There was a lot of like, why are you trying to rezone these small businesses when you allow these big businesses to come in? Which, both things can be true at the same time. It wasn't quite what was going on. But I think the real concern was that stuff would get built on Franklin side and then use those lots to come through. So that was the bigger concern, which I think fell a little bit on deaf ears as well.
well, and I will say it loud and clear, one of those property owners that got up and attacked the planning board during the public hearing process was saying that their business or their property was undeveloped. They felt that this zone change would negatively affect him because now the value of the property would be pretty much,
And that's what you're gonna get on any zone.
That's what we're gonna get on.
Any
Benefits some
and that person was saying that they wanted to do a nice self-storage facility. They did not get the permitting in yet, so the zone change permitting not. And sure enough, 3 years later, the application was submitted for a year now. So,
Yeah.
we get ahead of it.
No, that's a good point though. Like, if we go through this whole exercise, are landowners still allowed within reason to freeze their zoning? Because a couple of developers have done that and everyone starts throwing around the bait and switch thing,
Yeah,
which isn't really what happens in those scenarios, but people think it's what's going on. So that well, I think if you go through this whole effort, could these landowners freeze their zoning?
They could, but now is a good time to do it because there aren't any active applications. The issue was the active applications.
Oh, okay, I
That's
see.
with the warehouses. As soon as that petition went through,
Yeah,
applications when they submitted A and Rs.
yeah, be in the book, so you're already in the books, you can freeze your zoning.
Once the warehouse, once your bylaw came up, that's what happened, they all came forward.
Yeah, okay.
And I would expect we would have the same thing on any zone.
But if they don't have an application in,
They
they
will.
can't freeze their zoning.
Yeah, but the thing too, and don't
But
forget,
until it goes to town meeting, you've got that window.
Oh, right.
Yeah, what's the window that they have to submit, freeze the zoning once the changes occur?
so preliminary subdivision is, you can submit that, it's a 7-month freeze. Within that 7 months, you want to submit a definitive subdivision, and that's 8 years, I think, for that freeze. So, so with that, what was I gonna say?
You're gonna get much pushback
No.
on a mechanic in North Maine, you know, for mixed redevelopment or.
Yeah.
District, I mean, I think people are gonna.
We should be prepared
Because
for
it needs it.
owners and developers
No.
to try to freeze their zone. I think we need to prepare ourselves for that.
I think the other thing too is that if we are going to be doing zone changes, it is very critical that, you know, I wouldn't expect this board, because you all have full-time jobs to do this, but, you know, if we are going to be talking about rezoning specific parcels that are existing small businesses, it will definitely open up the line of communication well before anything is proposed, because they need to be in the know. Because to your point, Liz, if, for example, Maple Street, if we did do a rezone for the parcels that we were looking at initially, and it was more of a light business zone that's more in line with what's there and is gonna stop, you know, transportation terminals, drive-throughs, car washes, gas station, you know, that sort of stuff. I think they would be perfectly fine, because their uses or their current use is protected. It's not going to be a
So you're
existing.
talking about, down the road, a change of use,
Correct.
if you change the district.
Yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
change the
the
zone.
only reason why they would want to
Change the
freeze
use
their
too.
zone is if they were going to try to unload it to do more industrial uses, but those lots, they're
Empty lots.
You're doing something from,
talking about existing businesses.
Oh.
If they wanted to sell their lots, then
If you were a landowner and thought you had value because of your zoning, sell it off, then you'd have this change of, you'd have this preliminary stuff coming in.
yeah, I'm thinking more of like you're going from B2 to residential.
Yeah.
Or like B2 to agriculture. Like that, I think would be, you know.
and I wouldn't recommend that. I think,
Or B2 to mixed use.
yeah, like I think it, we
Or,
can protect the intent of existing businesses, but the thing is, which I'll go over next with that Shrewsbury Town Center
Yeah.
District. If we start looking at, for example, Mechanic Street, you have, if you're taking a left off Blackstone Street past the old DPW, on your left, you've got that granite business, you've got the motel, you've got the post office, you've got Mass Armament, you've got the diner, like. And then even going past that, there's the garage with all those Land Rover Defenders, you've got Taylor Rental, like
Barbecue.
the barbecue place. Those businesses are open, they're existing, but those sites are pretty old, and I think they're going towards their end of life. At some point, somebody's gonna wanna come in and redevelop or do something. That is where we want to.
Right.
especially kind of they combine 2 or 3 sites.
Right,
That's-
and you, that's why we should, if we have a vision, utilize the zoning to get that vision in place. And for me, I feel like the best thing would be Blackstone Street, as you know, was somebody mentioned, that's where our like the schools are, the library, the fields. You got the town center here, if there's a way to connect a pedestrian corridor along Blackstone Street all the way to the town center,
Yep.
that would be a huge draw, I think.
And if you incorporate that in our town center piece, because, coming down Mechanic Street, if that to me feels like in the center of town, businesses that are just extended down there, they're already kind of doing that center of town stuff that we want to keep going and redefine a little bit, but that, and then cut to,
Yeah,
Kind of like what Franklin did
well,
in their downtown area. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, the train. And
It's pretty awesome.
For holding to the 1 hour limit, you want me to jump into that Shrewsbury thing quick? Because I think I can do it in 15 minutes. Go over it quickly and then show you it's feasible to utilize the zone for something good. So,
Right to the visuals.
yeah, well, it's something that I didn't include in your Dropbox that I think you guys are gonna think is pretty cool. I think.
enjoy it. Who remembers the soccer fields?
Up on
Maple.
Were they existing or?
No, they were 12 soccer fields that are gonna go in with Amazon. And everyone on Maple Street supported it, including me. And I will tell you, after being in soccer for 12 years, I'm glad they're not there. Because when they run a tournament on the weekend, there's hundreds of cars.
Yeah.
In 90 minutes.
Well, you look at the fields that are right in,
And it starts Friday night.
You shouldn't get there because they're late.
And they park everywhere. Tennessee versus. So it's got to say, Route 3 has proven to be a pretty decent neighborhood.
Good.
So Amazon, so you continue with your super. Lincoln actually has in their comments from Maple Street, they're going to give fields back there they were trying to connect them out to Maple Street for athletic fields, for soccer fields and all that. We caught wind of that on the planning board and put some things in there that said, well, we asked the question, well, what are you doing for Bellingham? They said, well, I literally said that in the meeting. And we're like, well, time out then. We can't dump all that traffic without traffic studies. And they said, okay, then we're not, you shouldn't have to see Franklin's approvals. Most of the commercial Maple Street doesn't affect me because I'm not there. If the weekend use, if it was soccer fields, and Donnie and I were all over this.
yeah,
I even bid the project. I'm glad they're not there.
yeah.
It was in the Victory property. Yeah. No, it was on where Amazon. Amazon is now.
Yeah. I remember that.
It was a nice facility.
All right, I'll go through this pretty quickly, but this was included for you folks, but this is the town of Shrewsbury's town center district, and the whole intent was to make it pedestrian friendly. They have a huge parking problem over there, which is something we don't have, so a lot of the language in here is regarding parking and shared parking spaces and all this stuff.
We don't have a problem because we don't have much of a downtown.
Yeah, well, we're starting from scratch, which is kind of things. So if you go through it, the purpose is pretty straightforward. It's very similar to kind of like what we had for the Hartford Ave adaptive use overlay, where it's just to, utilize underutilized buildings, creating small business, place where people can live, shop, eat, conduct business, all that fun stuff. But they, like our Hartford Ave overlay, they had a specific criteria for the special permit, and it's all fairly cookie cutter with the exception, this D is regarding the construction materials, architectural design and site design, which is to enhance the actual site and to try and enhance budding sites as well. This E is where they start talking about all the parking freedoms, but I'm not going to get into that because we won't really have that issue here. But as you keep going down, yeah, is it? How's that?
I kind of.
Okay. This is just anything for a special permit stating that if there's any detriment relative to that, what's being proposed, that there needs to be mitigated, that conditions can be implemented by the special permit granting authority to comply with the measures. So that's that stuff. If I keep going down, it's this section, the design standards and guidelines, that is pretty impressive for this overlay. So first, as highlighted, they require architectural elevations for all sides of buildings, which we also require renderings as part of our submission for special permits. But they lay out a lot of architectural designs in this that they require, and also siting requirements to make it more pedestrian friendly, more aesthetically pleasing, and they really put an emphasis on keeping bikes and pedestrians safe, and also trying to enhance elements of like crosswalks, for example, and making sure that there's pedestrian refuge on the street.
Well, one of the things the planning board did for, Bridge Warehouse
Yeah.
was ask for a rendering on the ramp.
Ramp.
Remember, you guys wanted, and they did you.
Mechanic, the corner mechanic and Maple.
No, the big warehouse behind Home Depot,
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you guys have plans.
WS.
And the property elevations.
You want to see what it looked like is from the ramp.
Yeah.
I thought that was good.
Oh, from the 495 ramp.
Yeah.
I think it was a loading ramp. I'm like, wow.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. Sorry, no.
Never really talked.
Yeah, we did that on the other side too, is what can you actually see, and where was the building elevation compared to the roads and stuff like
So
that?
building on your renderings, I thought that was a good idea, and if you're trying to walk in and just general appearance, and you guys asked for tree heights and.
Yeah, the WS where we.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that stuff with that one, and
Mechanic Street.
yeah.
I was there, we asked, I mean, that was important there because it's like, what can you see? And we weren't gonna see anything, that kind of.
So, but moving forward, so they go through all the pedestrian walkways, making sure that essentially they want stuff like this where it's nicely landscaped, walkable, pedestrian refuge with
So,
all
I mean, images, sample images in the bylaw.
they do in this case. So, because they want to make it crystal clear. The other thing here that I think is very interesting is that, so they state in here that they want there to be fairly delineated walking paths for the pedestrians and bicycle ways, but like they have this image here that shows that, if you have just paint markings, it's not adequate. Right? You have to actually make it look nice.
Show off.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of neat.
Can we pause on that just for a
Sure.
moment? I'm curious what the general. Two approaches to crosswalks. And press through the curb to meet the road,
Yeah.
or elevate the crosswalk,
Yeah.
which creates a semi-speed bump at that place. I like the latter.
Well, so,
That might create a plow complaint.
well, not actually.
They seem to be able to manage it.
So the safety committee, whatever that, the roads committee, whatever it is, but they're looking at, a potential signalized crosswalk where DB Port crosses like, so it'd be Depot Street across 126 to where like Dairy Queen is. And the one thing that they were trying to figure out is it might warrant some type of pedestrian refuge in the middle, like a raised island of some sorts. And that might be what's needed. And I think,
Well, the problem with raised, either going up to the sidewalk or raised island is visually impaired in wheelchairs. They now have a small hill to climb,
yeah,
and they gotta navigate this step where if you raise the crosswalk, the same level.
Yeah, though, if it were a raised island in like the middle, so like there's like a 5 foot landscape from the island where, pedestrian can wait from the neck, if they have to hit the crosswalk again, or something. That would be level, like it wouldn't. that would be-
This is actually shown in this picture in the back.
Yeah,
Right.
so this is exactly what it would look. So this is flush.
In this case, they got a little bit of an opening.
Yeah, so but these are things that you can do, and I think it's interesting that for this, they basically said, you can, if you think that just marking a crosswalk on asphalt is adequate, it's not in this case, which you look at some really nice town centers, none of them.
I think the red brick appearance looks good.
Yeah, definitely. And this one too, I think this is actually saw cut asphalt, so it's like no pop or anything. That's
That's a
really nice. Yeah.
Wow.
So, moving on, property frontage, so basically stating that buildings need to be moved as far to the property frontage as possible. And that's for the pedestrians access, which they have, actual figures showing building with the entrance right on the sidewalk, buffers for parking, all these shade. Yeah, bike racks, street trees, all this stuff and they really make it clear on this is what there's no room for interpretation. This
Even
is,
the architectural, if you keep moving.
oh yeah, yeah, because this is more of just showing where the site design, but showing that, they want pedestrian bicycle access is kind of the main principal reason for the buildings to be put forward. But also stating that the minimum width is 8 feet, which is good because I could just picture somebody putting a 5 foot walk because that's the minimum. They're saying even if it can be wider, use raised flower beds, benches, and street ornaments to create, as they call it, small outdoor courtyards, which I think is really neat. 6, sidewalks should be reinforced concrete, but you can use other types of materials consistent with the purposes of the town center district. Standard asphalt coverage is not appropriate for sidewalk areas. That's big because I think, well, we've actually were talking with the DPW about our subdivision regs, which are basically, asphalt sidewalks, asphalt berms, which is why some of the subdivisions have been, I think, a little lackluster. Town center district, granite curbing, concrete walks, all like
Totally agree.
no question. Travel lanes for vehicles, so access, not a free car setbacks, has to be access through the side and parking will be in the front. Similar to that image that showed the parking lot on the side, you'll see later on, I think it's right here, actually. Never mind, if you have parking on the side of the building, there needs to be a nice landscape feature that's
Like municipal parking.
not in this.
Yeah,
No.
in Shrewsbury.
Well, so actually, they did have a school that they sold to a developer, the Deal School. Developer is tearing that down and making. I haven't seen the rendering. It was a pretty contentious project, but they wanted to do something in this district, I think, before the language actually was in place. And that the deal was they were going to include municipal parking as part of that big development. I will show you another development that did get approved
Oh, curious what type of retail they have.
in here. So it's basically,
What is drawing pedestrian wandering down the street from shop to shop to shop
so
versus I'm just gonna go to O'Reilly and then leave.
that's a good point. So mostly the things that they have in their use table it's restaurants, because Shrewsbury has quite a few restaurants in this area. I think they said, I mean, there's definitely retail for clothing and
Small retail.
small retail,
Stores.
bookstores,
Coffee
there's coffee shops. You'll see in a little bit an ice cream shop. So,
I asked that thinking about behind Dunkin' Donuts, not Dunkin' Dairy Queen.
yeah,
And would I ever go and park there and walk that line of stores?
well,
And I don't think I ever would.
so in Shrewsbury, I know that there are quite a few also professional businesses. I know the site that I'm gonna show you in a minute, that one, it was a real estate office.
Attorneys
And next door to it was an attorney's office. So there is, you want to focus on some of the destination spots too, because like right now, a lot, I think that plaza behind Dairy Queen is fully occupied.
Hmm.
And people aren't really going there because they're saying, ooh, like
It's
When
a
I-
browse.
when I show up here, I feel welcomed in here. This place.
I'll drive from one section to another just so I don't have to walk.
Yeah. You know, I think there is definitely a draw to anywhere that is walkable. Because if you think about it,
If it was walk Franklin,
Yeah.
certainly walk Main Street also.
oh yeah, there you go. So, yeah,
Like
Hometown.
North Attleboro, like downtown,
Yeah,
I've been there.
yeah. That's changed a lot over the years. It's become more like friendly to pedestrians.
they go into a lot of the landscape items too. One thing that I thought was interesting was they don't actually want turf. They want like landscaped beds, not seasoned grass, which I thought was actually a pretty good idea. The thing is though, with Shrewsbury, the lots are a lot smaller, so you don't really have real like areas that you could turf. And I don't know if you really want a lot of turf, you know, hardscape, and stuff. It might be. Screening, that is just stating that solid waste enclosures, service areas, mechanical equipment, all that stuff has to be landscaped.
We can't put chain link fences in front of these?
Yep, chain link fencing is prohibited, so can't do that unless it's for security reasons.
Yeah.
But they go through all these architectural things with the building forms, basically stating that, go to that. This one.
Well, what's the current landscape that they're trying to apply this to in Shrewsbury?
Underutilized buildings. So
Downtown.
the site that I will show you, that was an old dilapidated, underutilized vacant structure that used to be, I'm sure it was nice before, but
Right.
now it's just a
Yeah,
single scale building.
a nice little wandering Main Street. Whenever I think of Shrewsbury, I think of Spanish.
Love that place.
All the work
Place was moved.
planning board, and what they did, the reason why they did this was because they wanted to make sure that when you get a rendering, make sure that the engineer is working with an architect. You're gonna see what happens when you do that. So they go through all of this information about the windows. They also talk about if you have a large principal building, to break it up between tenant spaces and storefronts. And then they have a really good building materials too. I'm just trying to get to the, here we go.
Yeah.
That's a great diagram showing that, you know, all the entranceways need to be pronounced. If you want dormers that are the correct scale.
Or there's the architectural details that put it into a period of time.
Yeah, well, I think they were going for, because with Shrewsbury, there are some very nice older structures, but few. And they wanted to kind of capitalize on that, but
This
these,
is our chance to get gargoyles.
Yes, I've been saying we need more garbage.
You were talking about them.
Yeah,
Gotham City.
yeah. So, but they go through all of these, light poles, we're getting towards the end here. Making sure they're dark sky compliant and that they're not, trespassing onto adjacent properties. Tons of requirements for signage here too. I'll let you guys look through it all. Parking standards, this is where this section is very dense because, like I said, they have a parking issue in downtown, so they actually require, it's almost a special permit within a special permit for parking, where they want a report basically stating that you are making the parking situation better if you're in Bellingham.
Yeah.
So, it has to be behind the buildings.
Get to those images, you know. Yes.
Yeah, I remember when we tried to do the overlay down at Pulaski, and there was a, this would have been ideal to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But there really wasn't enough, there wasn't enough carrot there for people who had existing properties and existing businesses to go this route.
Absolutely.
Like, there wasn't enough, momentum in that direction to have that happen. Like, no one was gonna be the first one to go in and do this.
And I think like Pulaski, like they're saying Pulaski, it does need help. I think feasibly, center of town is a much more viable candidate for, in the short term, development, in my opinion. Pulaski, they think if there's homeless through the center of town, and zoning is utilizing Pulaski, in due time, I think people will say,
Completely agree.
yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
You gotta show the example first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and they go through more of this stuff, remote or off-site parking. So like I said, they have a parking issue in downtown Shrewsbury. So with that parking report, you can actually utilize parking spaces within 800 feet of your property, which you just have to make sure it's ADA compliant, which I don't know if you realize the difficulty of making sure a parking space within 800 feet of your property is an ADA compliant, but that is a tall order. But anyway, there's that. And then I just highlighted this because I know, we were just talking about ADUs. This is not compliant with the current state bylaw. They're actually stating that the owner of the property needs to occupy the principal dwelling. The gross floor area is much smaller, not much smaller, but smaller than what is required through the state. So I assume they're gonna have to update this at some point. I don't know if they did this as like a placeholder like we did, but anyway, they just wanted to add that because that was not in there when I was looking at this before I came over to Bellingham as planner. But speaking of my days in the private sector,
On this, do we have any provisions where ground floor would be retail and the upper floor would be residential?
we don't, but they specify it in their use table in Shrewsbury for this district, because you are not allowed to have primary multifamily residence in this district. If you want to put residential in this district, it has to be a mixed use residential with commercial on first floor or office or whatever.
The reason I bring this up is my daughter just recently attended, a couple weeks ago, a family wedding in Tottenham,
Yeah,
in Italy. And
fancy.
the, what's the new rental is? Airbnbs. Prior to Airbnb, the foot traffic for transient tourists was limited to either what a bus could bring in or hotels in the area. And that was kind of a natural circuit breaker for visitor occupancy laws. Airbnbs have blown that away. Everything is overrun.
Interesting.
I just can't
And,
imagine tourists coming to downtown Bellingham.
Um,
But I get your point though,
but
yeah.
the point is, think big.
Well, yeah, you think of all the
Oh,
problems.
you wanna go, Tuscany?
You know, or
Well, they might still go to a ride.
So, there's no one here old enough to remember the horses performing in Silver Lake.
No, but I've seen that stuff,
Yeah.
pictures, yeah,
No, I wasn't there. No,
came every year.
I.
The carousel.
Charles,
Yeah.
and I was driving, I stayed that this was a go-to destination for New Jerseyans at one point in time.
My parents.
Now we have a trolley.
Right.
Bring back the trolley.
was there.
So quickly, because I'm already over the time limit, but this is the site that before I started in Bellingham, this was one of my last projects at the company I worked for. And this was in the overlay district. This is an old, vacant, it was a real estate office. And you can see, so this is a lawyer, or I'm sorry, this is a real estate office. I think this was the, no, this was a real estate office. There's an attorney in this building. And as you go further down, you get nicer buildings. This is that Beale School that was sold and being redeveloped. But basically, this is towards the end of that district, because as you go further down, you'll see it turns into a lot more commercial base. But as you can see, this site, it's like a quarter of an acre, not very appealing, vacant, underutilized. There wasn't a whole lot of space to actually do anything with it. But let me show you what,
What are those granite pillars for? What are these for?
I think that's for if a car decides to accelerate into Maple Avenue, which is a very, very busy street. And then behind this is another street, so we're on a pins. But what we ended up doing was this. Like I said, it's a postage stamp lot. This is the existing condition, so this was the building, these are the property lines here, so very, very close, everything was paved. The owner wanted to do commercial on the first floor and 2 apartments, the second and the third floor, within the design criteria of that district. With that, he wanted to do sorry. He wanted to do an ice cream shop on the first floor, so parking in the back off of this main street. There's a patio in the front of the building, and this building was pushed as far up front along Maple Avenue as possible. But what really was cool, I'll show you what the architect did to meet the, this is the layout. This is the first floor with the ice cream shop. And then this is the second and third floor apartments, the 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
So no elevator, it was just.
No.
On the second floor.
But pretty good renderings.
Yeah.
Did you choose the colors?
Me? No, I did not.
That's something I would ask.
Yeah.
The flavor of the ice cream was there.
Yeah, right?
These are the black and white renderings of the building. We had to have, there was an elevation change in the front, so there had to be.
Were they tearing the whole thing down or just
Tearing the whole thing down, reworking the whole thing, and this is what they came up with. This was approved. It's a good looking building. I don't know if construction has started yet, but it did get approved.
That looks kind of odd, like.
I know it does.
Well, I know with the way that it's oriented,
Yeah, yeah.
but that,
Can't believe it.
Like, it's not emphasizing the retail part a lot, like, you know?
well, they
That
wanted,
particular elevation. right?
they want separate, fixtures and separate, materials to separate second and third floor residential from first and commercial.
I'm telling you, it looked better, half a story shorter.
Oh.
And the colors are terrible too.
Yeah.
Picked out the cotton candy and lime Ricky.
Did you bring that to approval?
Oh, no.
No, I was working here, I think, in front of the planning board, but it was approved in one meeting.
Is that, I think he's like this, or it's not
It's,
that area, because you know where that school was, like. Then you got, the steakhouse, right? Is that those two roads, maybe?
is Hickey's Liquors that, no, it's-
The,
the steakhouse.
Willie's?
Steakhouse, yeah, the steakhouse is right over here.
Oh, yeah.
Keep it
Yeah,
down.
that's where, I think you just went by Hickey's, okay.
That's the steakhouse.
Yeah, all right. And then there's that Italian, Michi is right
Right
here.
here.
Yeah.
The place is good,
Yeah, it is really good.
Nice little
140.
town common, there's a library.
And this is Shrewsbury Center,
This is Shrewsbury Senior current.
church is around the corner.
Yeah, so. That's just an example, apparently it doesn't meet the standards of this committee.
Which I stand.
Yeah, no kidding.
For this comes to.
Should we take a look at the minutes?
Yeah, why don't we do that and let's get out of here, right? It can only take so much of this, but you can. Still double space. Oh,
Listen, listen,
Smaller.
smaller fonts.
Nice, why?
Safe paper.
now it's emphasizing the double spacing.
Yeah, I think these are actually triple spaced.
With really deep size font.
You, here, for the season, you were here at the last meeting, right? Alright, so.
And was Dawn here last?
John was here.
Oh,
So this is the last meeting, correct?
Correct.
So I'm
yeah.
not present.
I struck it.
The downtown is a great design with walkable areas. The inclusion of landscape. I think it's a sentence you said out loud.
Oh, yeah.
I'm reading for the paper. Yes, script.
That's a show coast things.
Be ready spaces.
Yes, HCO, what's actual?
Where you see it?
Paragraph.
The page.
Consider HCO to be followed.
That's regarding the traffic studies. ASHTO is like the American Safety Highway Transportation or something.
Organization. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the only amendment is the change for members friendly.
I have, just move that off.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's next meeting, I don't know what. I'm feeling.
Busy tomorrow.
Funny guy. I know we're looking at Wednesdays and I don't know, you guys want to meet July 16th?
Is that this next day for this planning board?
Yeah, planning board is the 17th.
Yeah.
When's conservation?
And I don't think we have it.
Week before.
Yeah,
The ninth.
Yeah, we're off. In July, if we only have 1 week. We pushed everything back.
Yeah, I can make the 16th.
At that meeting, to kind of get more of a definitive idea of where we want to focus, you want me to look at the zoning map pull out some areas that I think might be, we can look at and,
I agree.
okay,
And I think there's a number of people at this table who mentioned doing things, in bite-sized pieces. We should probably, that's a great approach. Do that with the zoning and, if you're thinking about downtown district or the downtown itself.
definitely. And it might make sense if we're looking at cleaving uses in specific zones. It might even make sense to just, for like, whatever the next town meeting is that we adopt something, just make amendments to the use table and then adopt the new zone at a separate meeting. Because if we do both, people might lose their minds. Not understand.
Next town meeting, we'll be trying to do the drive-through,
Correct.
right?
And we get, I mean, there's still time, if there's some
We
other
could-
stuff we wanna
yeah.
add, we got time, so.
I think an outreach. Should be, where it's in, there's that,
I agree. So,
might take a little long.
yeah, which I think that's, that I think the downfall on a lot of changes as well. Lack of public outreach, you get the public hearings advertised, but then a lot of people may not see that.
I was telling, we had 12,000 voters. Is that correct?
No, if that's true. Someone looked it up.
18,000 residents.
Right,
So.
12,000.
Yeah.
6,000 voters. Maybe I'm.
We got 6,000, and 184 votes for last time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've got 7.
What was the information? Yeah, I can't think it was that, I feel like my votes were, 30 of them voted no on everything.
yeah.
1,600.
We're good to adjourn, right?
Motion to adjourn.
Ready?
All right.
Bye.